This is Wretched Radio with Todd Friel.
What a world. What a world. This is Wretched Radio. Talked about an email that I received last week that might be worth your consideration in light of the New York Times article suggesting we got to get rid of gender bias in the NASA program so that women can make it to the moon. I guess to make it to the moon, women have to escape Earth's gender bias. Now, why is it that that program was dominated by males for so long? Could there have been an attitude of condescension? Yes. Yes, there could have. I mean, that's sinful. But after all, this is a planet filled with sinners, so I would never say, no, it had nothing to do with sexism. It may have, but it was also a different era. It was generally accepted by our culture that men would play the risk-taker role for the betterment of society, for women, children, and men also. That was just the accepted norm. That's simply changed. Now, the question, of course, for us as Christians is, how do we respond to that? Received this email from a Mrs. Johnson, and I just thought this was so fascinating and forces us to consider what is the era that I'm living in, and how am I going to respond to a culture that is moving away from Christian norms as fast as Joey, Tony,
the speed of
give
light.
Give them the metaphor. As you can do better than the speed of light, can't you? Faster. Oh, I've got this.
And the speeding bullet more powerful than the locomotive?
Faster. Hold on, I think I got one. Faster than Ken Ham would run away from an old Earth sermon. That's what I got for you right
I'm
there.
not sure Ken would run away, though, would he? He'd
probably jump into the fray.
Have to fix it, yeah.
That is true. Dear Mr.
Faster
Mr.
than
Mr.
Supergirl
Friel.
getting home to get muffins out of the oven.
Wow. In yesteryear, it was considered the norm for men to show deference to women, such as opening the door for her, tipping his hat, offering to pay for her meals, standing for her to sit on the train, offer to carry her bags, pull out her chair, etc., etc. Okay. Now, this is sort of speculative, but nevertheless, why were those things done? What informed those social norms? And I think in our Western civilization that the Bible mostly, I'm not saying everybody was saved, but mostly informed the thinking that men are stronger. And I think we can all agree on that, right? That there is a stronger and a weaker, and that the stronger should do things that would make it easier or better for the weaker. Furthermore, standing up when a lady entered the room, it was to show deference. It was to show respect. It wasn't to be somehow derogatory in our attitude toward women. It was an honorable thing to do. A lady is in the room. That's a form of honor, not a form of dishonor. Where did that come from? I suspect mostly from a Christian mindset. Now, the letter continues. My father-in-law, on a recent visit, opened the topic of social norms. Let's just stop for a moment. Social norms. What are those? They are cultural things that we have concocted and basically agreed to as this is the way we're kind of going to do things around here. This is the style of clothing. This is the way we're going to behave. These are the principles that we operate under. They're social norms, and they can look different in different cultures. And neither culture can be sinning because they are just that, they're norms. They're not biblical commandments. We need to remember that. Back to the father-in-law. They opened the topic of social norms and practicing politeness, saying it was unnecessary and likely inappropriate to practice older standards, citing they were from a bygone era where women were lower-class citizens and often didn't have their own means. Okay, I reject that. Nevertheless, there would have been men paying for the meal, say, on a date because, perhaps, that women were making less then. That is indeed possible. And that men were predominantly the breadwinners making more, and it was just an act of kindness, not an act of pity or charity per se. Nevertheless, that is a bygone era, isn't it? I remember once taking the time to open a door for a young lady, and she literally, she stopped, and I went, oh, please, go ahead. She literally, she made a noise, like she was disgusted with me. Why? Because social norms are changing, and the problem is we live in a transition time. So now, Christian, what do we do in this transition time? How do we respond to this? Back to Mrs. Johnson. I grew up with these things as a standard and found that honoring my gender, being treated as special for being a lady and not just one of the boys, to be a beautiful way of expressing appreciation for my gender. Even today, I'm thrilled when a man tips his hat or nods his head in passing simply because he notices a lady. In conversation with my hubby later, the conclusion was reached. There is no biblical reason to undergird these practices unless the woman is your own wife. Well then, is that where we're at? So gentlemen, don't hold the door for ladies anymore. If you see a woman struggling with a package, she's on her own. Don't offer any form of politeness because it's not a biblical command. Only your wife should receive that kind of treatment. Is that where we're at?
Did you ever try that? If you're honest with yourself, it feels wrong to ignore something like that.
But that could be simply because you're trained culturally. That's just what you've practiced for decades.
Innate.
You think so?
I do.
All right. So what do we do now, Tony? The culture rejects it.
I still open doors, so I don't know what to tell you.
All right. And what if you get the same woman that I had? Ugh. Chauvinist.
Well, I'd call it a plus, but...
Everything in me, writes Mrs. Johnson, says that accepting the current culture's standard of politeness, in other words, if you wouldn't do it for a man, don't do it for a woman, treat all people the same regardless of gender is not a beautiful standard for the Christian to strive for. I agree with that. But without a biblical standard to treat all women with deference, rather than just a man's own wife, I was stumped as to whether to teach our sons to give women social deference and our daughters to graciously accept the courtesy, or would I follow the social norms, teach my daughters to pay for their half and my sons to treat women and men completely the same in every social setting? Well, the times, they are a-changing. How would I raise my kids? What do I think we do? We are in a transition time. So I think we need to accept that. This is another sign, in my opinion, of a post-Christian culture where the whole gender blurring, it's just everybody's the same. There's no deference. There's no consideration. There's no acknowledgement that there's any sort of difference of a stronger and weaker. That is just saying that. These could get you kicked off the YouTube machine these days. So I think we need to recognize that. Should we continue doing it for our spouses? Absolutely, in my opinion. What about for women at church, my fellow believers? Absolutely. What about you're in public and you're going to whatever building or campus or office? Do you do it there? I think the answer is I think you should try to demonstrate that. I don't think it's a sin to not do it, frankly. And I wouldn't even say if our culture somehow there's a hashtag don't open the door for me, you jerk movement. And okay, we won't open the doors any. Okay, if that's what you want, I don't think we need to feel like we're sinning in that. If the world is actually offended by our behavior, then I think we just stop it. But this, yet to me, again, is another opportunity to show the world something different. We've seen the changing of our culture just change so rapidly. Now, part of it is J-curve. You know, it's been going on, postmodernism. At the age of the Enlightenment, it started. It gets into postmodernism, radical feminism, the free love movement in the 60s. Well, all of a sudden, boom, it's like everything's just falling apart. Everybody's going bonkers. And I think that the social media, the internet, the speed at which we are able to receive information and disseminate it has caused to the rapid change, downward change of our culture. And if that's true, is it possible, maybe, that as the culture gets so sick of it and they see us Christians acting in a way where we open the door for our wife, why do you stand up when she gets up from the table? You hold her chair? You carry heavy things for her? You protect her? You show deference to her? I wonder if the world will get increasingly sick of its sin and tired of its worldview bringing nothing but sadness, hopelessness, depression, and suicide, and start to look at Christianity and those weird Christians that actually do those old-fashioned things, and they start asking about the reason for the hope that lies within us. And I keep thinking about Owen Strand's new book, which is coming out soon, Re-Enchanting the World. Do we have a chance to start being such a peculiar people? The world getting increasingly tired of its dead-end worldview will start looking to Christianity and going, all right, that's it. I want to know. How should you raise your kids? I think show deference to the ladies. If the world hates it, well, you'll just have to cope with that. But let's use it as an opportunity for evangelism, even as the world increasingly shuns such archaic ideas and hates us for it. And until tomorrow, go serve your king.
If you're a Christian, would you please consider liking, subscribing, or sharing this video? If, however, you're a pagan, please get saved. And then like, subscribe, or share this video.